Hey everybody, it's Charlie Craven with Fly Fisherman Magazine, and for the April-May edition, I'm going to tie Zach VanDeHey's Picky Eater Perdigon. This is a cool little Perdigon pattern that's got a few little twists and tied a little bit differently than the usual, which is sort of compelling to me. You know how I feel about Perdigons, but this one I feel pretty good about. I'm going to tie this on my Dynaking Barracuda, and this vise has got the new jaws from Dynaking. So these are the 3D printed steel jaws, and I can say for sure they hold much better than the old ones. New ones coming out quickly, kind of doling them out as the season goes on, but keep an eye out for that kind of stuff. But in the meantime, let's twist up a Picky Eater Perdigon and see what you think. Good morning. I'm Charlie Craven, and today I'm going to tie for you Zach VanDeHey's Picky Eater Perdigon. This is a fly that Zach designed, sort of contrary to the usual Euro nymph style, in that he actually wanted a fly that sunk a little slower rather than just plummeting straight to the bottom. It seems Zach had encountered some fish that were eating mid-water column and went home and designed a fly with a CDC collar, which is a pretty crafty way to do it. But what that does is sort of slows the sink rate down so that this fly will fish mid-column rather than, or spend more time mid-column rather than plummet straight to the bottom, which is a pretty crafty way to go about it. This is a cool fly. Fairly simple tie, like most of these Euro nymphs are. Just a simple CDC collar, a strip peacock body, a CDL tail, and the requisite hot spot, which he has put in a sort of unusual spot there behind the collar. So let's get tying this. I'll walk you through it. It's kind of a fun one. I've actually been enjoying tying a few of these. So I'm going to start off. I've got a Hanek 450. You could also use an Umpqua XT 450. And I've got a 2.5 millimeter silver tungsten bead on here. And I'm tying a size 16 here. You do want to, for mid-water column use anyway, you do want to undersize the bead slightly, so you could even go down to a 2 millimeter bead here. And Zach does say that he likes to fish this fly in a size 18 or 20 most of the time, but I'm going to tie you a little bigger one just to make it a little easier to see here on camera. So I'm going to start off, and I've got here some, get you, Magpie Materials 72 denier thread, and this is their olive dun color, which just matches up nicely with this olive quill. So I'm going to set my bead in place. And one of the things that I see a lot of people have trouble with is getting that bead sort of jammed up. So I'm going to show you a little trick here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my tag into my thread tight and push it right up against the back of that bead, and then just start creating my thread dam. By holding onto that tag end, that'll keep my dam from falling down, and just jam a thread dam right up against the back of that bead. And you can see how that centers that. That took, I don't know, 8 or 10 turns of thread, but a much more efficient way to do that. And from there I'm just going to make a nice smooth thread base all the way back to the bend. One of the things I like about this Magpie thread, you can see how it's a polyester thread, but you can see how flat it lays. Really a nice flat thread, makes a nice smooth underbody on quill-bodied flies or things of that nature. And for the tail, I'm going to use some Coq de Leon Pardo. You know, and there's Pardo comes in a billion different colors, and you know, I always say, honestly, if I tied you, 10 flies with 10 different colors, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the colors. Light, dark, medium, probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the colors on the finished fly. But I'm going to take 10 or 12 of these and square the tips up. Got to get them where I can see them, like so. And I'll peel that clump off the stem and just bundle that up into a little bunch, and about a shank length long or so for the tail, maybe a little shorter. And I'm going to lay that in at the bend, come forward over those butts, so we've just got a nice little clean tail there. And it's not to say that you couldn't use a different material for the tail, but that CDL is exceedingly durable, which I think is why it's so popular in competition flies, is that tail is a hard fiber, and it's just not going to come off, not going to get chewed off or pulled off with your forceps when you're taking the fly out of the fish, so just a little bit more durable. Now for the body, what we're going to use is a stripped peacock quill. and these are from Fulling Mill, and these I want. Let's see if I can get a hold of one here. Find a nice thick one. There we go. And I'll show you something on these as well. You can see the butt end of this is fairly wide, and it's got a dark edge. The dark edge is on top. But down here toward the base, or toward the tip, rather, it's fairly thin. And your inclination is to tie this in by the very tip and start wrapping. The problem is that tip is so thin, you're going to make 297 wraps trying to build the body. So what I want to do is cut this, really it's about halfway up, maybe even slightly more than halfway up. Like so. And then I want to tie this in with the dark edge down. And I'm going to wrap back over it. Again, trying to keep a nice smooth underbody. All the way back to the base of the tail. And I'll come forward again. And you can build, especially on a little bit bigger one, you can build a slight taper here. It doesn't need to be much though. You want to have this fairly thin. So just a nice smooth underbody. Now, one thing that Zach does that I really like, and I agree with, is he doesn't coat over the top of this body with any sort of resin. He just puts a little super glue down before he wraps it, and that toughens it more than sufficiently. So I'm going to put just a little coat of Zap-A-Gap on the hook here, kind of top and bottom. Just a light coat. Little goes a long way with any sort of super glue. Then I'm going to pick up my hackle pliers. And I'm going to grab the tip of this quill. And as I start to wrap it, I want that dark edge to be on the back side of the turn. So as I start to turn this, you can see that back edge will create a rib as I wrap forward, and I'm just slightly overlapping those turns. And even half this feather is more than enough to cover the body length of this fly. We get that really nice ribbed effect on the body. And I'll tie that quill off with a couple of turns. And come in and trim out the excess. Good pair of hackle pliers makes a huge difference there. Those are Jorgensen hackle tweezers. That's the best thing I've found for little short feathers. But you can see how beautiful that body is. Those quill bodies, there's no arguing with it. Those are really pretty bodies, really nice segmentation sort of built in on that quill. And no need to put resin on top of it. So now for the thorax, I'm going to take just a little bit of squirrel dubbing. And this is just pine squirrel. And you could use any variety of mixes for this. This is actually from Magpie Materials as well. It's his secret squirrel dubbing. But one of the keys on this fly is you want to make this thorax pretty small. It's just a little ball. It's just to kind of help stand things up a bit. So just a thin little strand of that squirrel dubbing. And I'm going to build this just up here behind the bead, but I do want to leave myself some room. So I'm just going to build a ball, and it usually takes, just like that, about 3 turns. So just a small little ball there behind the bead to create the thorax. Now for the hot spot, this is number 5 Glow Bright. And I'm going to take a piece that's an inch or so long. And what I like to do is put it under the hook behind the thread here. And I'll grab the front end and just pull it to the top. And you can kind of use the notch in the bead. See how that fell right into the notch in the bead here on this front side. Use the notch in the bead to center it. And then I'll pull both strands back and just put a few turns over it. And you can leave that long for the time being. So now I'm going to make a dubbing loop to apply the CDC collar. And I've got to admit, I've tied a few more of these since I wrote the magazine article in Fly Fisherman. And in that time, I've actually figured out maybe a little bit better way to do this collar, which is great because I really like CDC collars on nymphs. And there's a variety of ways to do them, but this way for a smaller fly I think works really nicely, so I might as well show it to you. So 2 for the price of 1 here. So I'm going to create a dubbing loop about 2 or 3 inches long. And I want to close that loop off, and then I'm going to just set that back out of my way, pin it against my vise so that it doesn't turn. Now what I've got are two CDC feathers. These are just natural colored CDC feathers. And what I want to do here, what I had done previously, is just taking that whole feather and put it in the loop, or at least one side of it. But what I want to do here is I'm going to pull these fibers off and sort of clump them up into a bunch, like so. And you can see the ends of those are pretty ragged and uneven. I've even got a butt end in there somehow. But what I'll do to these is sort of choke up on them toward the tips, and then I'm just going to use my thumbnail to break them off a little bit more square. You can see they're not perfectly even. That's just a little tuft of CDC. Now what I'm going to do is kind of spread that out again, let that flatten out in my fingers a bit, like so. And I'm going to pick up my dubbing loop. I'm going to put those fibers in the loop. And what I'm trying to measure for, if I can get these, let me slide these up a bit so you could see them a little more clearly. These tips I want to extend just about back to the bend. These butt ends I'm going to cut off, the butt ends on the front side here. So once I've got that measurement where I think I want it, I can kind of turn that loop with my fingers just by rolling my finger against the thread. And then with good sharp scissors, I'm going to cut those butt ends off, like so. Now I can pinch. You can push those ends in a little bit as well. I'm going to pinch just below the fibers, and I'll spin my dubbing whirl until that twist kind of pushes up through my fingers. And that'll start to create our little CDC hackle. So now I'm going to wrap this. And as I wrap this, I like to fold this back. And this is pretty typical on any collar. I like to fold it back like a wet fly style collar after each turn. Just sweep those fibers back. And you can see it's just a couple of turns. Then I'll tie that off just behind the bead. Here's a trick. Let's see. Let me get my hand out of the way. You can see these fibers that are sticking out down here. To catch those in place, if I take a turn in front of them, see how that pushed those back? So I just want to anchor those in place. Then I can come in and trim my loop out. So I've got this nice sparse CDC collar all the way around. Now I can sort of sweep the remainder back, and just a few turns, it's not going to take many, of thread to kind of build a little neck there behind the bead. And we've got a perfectly proportioned collar that's still ragged. It's not square cut, but still ragged and nice and clean. Then I'm going to come in with my whip finisher, and I'm just going to whip finish here in behind the bead. Just smooth things off. Clip that thread out. And then finally, I'm going to trim the tag here. And our little hot spot is going to be about, Zach and I talked about this last night, he likes about the length of the bead. So the easiest thing to do is pull it forward and just cut it at the front edge of the bead. You'll end up with just that little hot spot inside of there. That's pretty slick. And that is the Picky Eater Perdigon. I'm sort of excited about this. And this, if you guys have been listening to me, which maybe is not always the best idea, I'm not a huge fan of Euro nymphs. I find them to be simple and non-compelling in most cases. But this fly has changed that. I enjoy it. Pretty cool little fly. I'm going to put these in my box. I'm going to fish with these. That's a cool fly. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. I'm Charlie Craven. You guys take care.